The Deep Dive podcast is brought to you by X9 Intelligence, LLC. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and visit our blogs at x9intel.com. Happy New Year. It's 2025 already, can you believe it?
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
For our first deep dive of the year, we're broadcasting live on January 5th. And we're jumping right into a topic that's been everywhere lately.
Oh, yeah, definitely everywhere.
The connection between the rise of AI agents
Yeah.
and all this talk about universal basic income, or UBI.
Yeah, it's not just talk anymore. It really feels like things are shifting. Like these two things, AI and UBI, are colliding. And it could completely reshape, society.
So I've been reading up on this, like we both have, and I'm still not sure I get the whole AI agent thing. It sounds a bit like, sci-fi to me. Sure. Could you maybe break it down for me? And for our listeners who aren't tech experts.
Sure. So in the past, AI was mostly about data, like algorithms. Think of things like Netflix recommendations or spam filters for your email.
Right.
But AI agents, they're different. They actually take actions in the real world and often independently. So imagine software that can write code, but then also test it, debug it, and even deploy it without a person needing to do anything. That's an AI agent.
Whoa. So it's not just robots in factories. This is AI doing stuff that people used to do.
Yeah.
Stuff that needs thinking and decision making.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's a little unnerving.
It is, yeah, and it's happening really fast, faster than I think a lot of people realize. We were reading about Google. They're already using AI for a bunch of their code.
Really?
Yeah, and Microsoft has this thing called Copilot. It's a studio that lets businesses use AI agents all over the place, in different departments. So this isn't some, future thing. It's happening right now.
So, okay, let's say I'm a business owner. Why would I want to replace my employees, actual people, with these AI agents? I get that it could be cheaper.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah.
But there has to be more to it than just saving money, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it kind of gets to the whole economic picture. Cost is definitely a part of it, but it's not the only thing. AI agents can just do so much more than people, in terms of efficiency and how much they get done.
Okay.
They can work 24/7, no breaks, no vacations. What? And they process information and make decisions way faster than we can.
So it sounds like we're headed for a lot of people being out of work, and that's where UBI comes in, I guess.
Yeah.
As a way to help people who lose their jobs because of AI.
Exactly. As AI gets more advanced and can do more, it's going to replace workers in all sorts of jobs, like truck drivers, customer service, even lawyers.
Right.
And accountants could be replaced by AI.
Well, now.
And pretty soon too. So UBI is this idea to make sure everyone has some income, even if they don't have a job.
So basically it's like getting a paycheck from the government, guaranteed.
Yeah.
But how would that even work? Where does the money come from?
Well, there are lots of ideas about how to pay for UBI. Some say tax the companies that are making money from AI. Others say use money from things like carbon taxes or taxes on land. It's complicated, and there's no easy answer.
It sounds like it could be a real mess logistically. But even if we could figure out the money part, has anyone actually tried UBI? Are there examples we can look at to see if it works?
Oh, yeah, for sure. There have been a bunch of UBI experiments all over the world. Some worked better than others. One of the most famous ones is the Sam Altman study here in the US. We've some info on that. Basically, they gave people money regularly for a couple of years, and then they tracked what happened, how it affected their lives.
Okay, so what did they find? Did people just waste the money? Or did it actually make a difference?
Well, that's what surprised a lot of people. The study found that people mostly used the money for, essentials like groceries, rent, and transportation. And people were less stressed about money. Their mental health was better. And they even had less problems with, drinking too much.
So it wasn't just giving people money. It actually made their lives better overall. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. And there's evidence that having that extra bit of, breathing room, it let people be more picky about jobs.
Yeah.
Instead of just taking anything that came along.
Interesting. So maybe UBI could help people find work they actually like. It's not just surviving. It's about giving people choices.
Yeah.
Choices that, fit with their lives.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this wasn't the only UBI experiment. We've got research here on other programs like in Finland, Kenya, and India. They all had different designs and results, and it's really interesting to compare them and see what we can learn from each one.
Okay, so we've got AI agents becoming more common, which could mean millions of people losing their jobs. And we've got UBI as a possible way to deal with that. But let's get practical. What would life actually be like with UBI? What would a good situation look like?
All right, so imagine a world where everyone gets enough money to cover the basics. Food, housing, healthcare. You don't have to worry about paying rent or buying food. You're free to do what you're passionate about, whether that's starting a business, going back to school, or just spending more time with people you care about.
It sounds perfect, but is it realistic? Wouldn't people just stop working and, sit around all day?
That's what people worry about, But the UBI experiments show that most people actually want to work and do something to contribute. UBI just lets them do it on their own terms. Maybe you start that business you've always wanted to, or maybe you volunteer for something you care about. The point is, you have options.
It's a pretty optimistic view, but let's be real. There are probably some downsides, right? What could go wrong with UBI?
Well, that's where things get a little tricky. Yeah, one of the biggest problems is figuring out how to actually pay for UBI without messing up the whole economy. Some ideas out there, like a big AI automation tax, could actually slow down innovation and make companies not want to invest in new technology. It's a tough balance.
Right. And even if we figure out the money part, there's still the question of whether UBI would actually do what it's supposed to. What if it causes prices to go way up? Or what if people just stop working completely because they're getting money anyway?
Yeah, those are valid concerns here. And that's why we have to look at what happened in those UBI experiments. The results are all over the place. And it shows that there are no simple answers. Some studies showed that more people started businesses and got involved in their communities. But others show that people worked less and even went into more debt.
So UBI isn't like a magic solution then. It sounds like it could be good or bad, and there's no guarantee it'll work out.
That's a good way to put it, Ro. And I think it's important to remember that UBI isn't just about the economy, it's a social experiment. And it could have really big consequences. It makes us think about, what is work even? What's the government's role in all this? And even, what does it mean to live a good life?
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing when you think about all the ways UBI could change things. But let's go back to AI for a minute. You said earlier that some jobs are more likely to be automated than others. What are some examples of those?
Sure. We've got research that says jobs that are the same thing over and over, or jobs that are really predictable are the ones AI will take over first. Things like data entry, telemarketing, and even some factory work. As AI gets smarter, it'll be able to do these jobs faster and better and cheaper than people.
Okay, but what about jobs that need creativity or critical thinking? Or even emotional intelligence? Are those safe from AI?
That's a tough one. Even in fields like writing and design and music, AI is starting to do some of those things. There are AI agents now that can make art, compose music, and even write news articles. Maybe they can't replace human creativity completely, but they can definitely do parts of those jobs.
It's kind of amazing, but also a little scary to think about.
Well, let's talk about something else for a second. What about the ethical side of all this? Are there moral issues we need to think about as AI becomes more common?
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge part of this inquiry, and it often gets ignored. One of the biggest worries is bias in AI. If AI is trained on data that's biased, it can make existing inequalities even worse. Imagine an AI system for hiring that favors certain types of people, or an AI system for sentencing criminals that's unfair to people of color.
That's pretty disturbing. So it's not just the technology, it's how it's made and used, right? We need to make sure AI benefits everyone, not just a few people.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the question of who's responsible when AI messes up? If an AI agent makes a mistake, who's to blame? The person who programmed it, the company that used it, or the AI itself? These are tough questions that we need to figure out. As AI becomes more independent and powerful, it sounds like we're opening a can of worms here, ethically speaking. But let's try to end on a more positive note.
Yeah.
What are some ways AI could actually make our lives better and, make the world a better place?
Well, despite the risks, AI could also help us solve some of the biggest problems we face. Imagine AI that can diagnose diseases really accurately, or develop new sources of clean energy, or even help us fight climate change.
Now, that's the kind of future I want to be a part of. AI that helps us build a world that's, fairer and more sustainable. But it all comes back to how we handle this transition to an AI-driven world. How do we make sure everyone benefits from AI and that everyone has a chance to succeed?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. There's no easy answer. But I think it starts with talking openly and honestly, working together, and being willing to change. We need to bring everyone to the table, politicians, tech people, everyday people, to have these conversations about what kind of future we want.
It sounds like a big challenge. But I think it's worth it, Noah, because we're talking about the future of humanity here.
Absolutely. And the decisions we make now will have a huge impact on the world we leave for the next generation. So we need to choose carefully.
Well said. And speaking of choices, let's bring this back to our listeners and the decisions they might be facing in their own lives. We talked about the good things about UBI, but what about the bad? What's the, worst case scenario we need to be ready for?
Okay, so picture this. The shift to an AI-driven economy goes badly. Tons of people lose their jobs, and there's not enough support to help them. The gap between the rich and the poor gets way bigger, and there's unrest and chaos everywhere.
That sounds really bleak, like a dystopian movie, but could it really happen?
It's definitely a risk we need to pay attention to. History is full of examples where new technology caused huge social problems. If we don't handle this AI transition carefully, we could see the same thing happen in the next few decades.
So it's not enough to just give people money. We need to create a system that actually supports them. During this time of massive change, what would that look like?
Well, we need to invest in job training programs that teach people the skills they need for the new jobs that are being created. We need affordable housing so people aren't forced out of their homes. And we need to make sure everyone has access to healthcare and education, no matter how much money they make.
It sounds like a huge project. Do we even have the resources and, the political will to do all that?
That's the question, isn't it? It's going to require a big shift in our priorities and a willingness to invest in our future. But I do think it's possible if we work together and put people first.
Okay, let's say we do manage to create that better world, that world that's fair and sustainable. What would life be like for someone living with UBI? Walk me through a typical day. What changes? What stays the same? What are the opportunities and challenges?
Well, imagine you wake up on a Tuesday morning, but instead of rushing off to a job you might not even like, you have the time and freedom to choose what you want to do. You could finally start that woodworking project you've been putting off, or go to the park for yoga with friends.
So I could actually become that morning yoga person I've always wanted to be. Okay, I'm listening. But I'm guessing my rent and groceries still have to be paid. So how does UBI actually, work in real life?
Right. So the UBI payment you get each month covers your basic needs, like rent, groceries, utilities, that kind of thing. It's like a safety net, so you're not constantly worried about money. And that frees up your time and energy to do other stuff, whether that's paid work, volunteering, creative things, or just hanging out with family and friends.
Okay, so I'm not rich, but I'm not going broke either.
Yeah.
What about jobs in this UBI world? Are people still working regular jobs? Or is everyone just doing their own thing?
It's a mix, actually. Some people might work less, maybe doing part-time gigs or freelance stuff that they enjoy. Others might keep working full-time, maybe because they like their job, or they want more money than UBI gives them.
So there's flexibility. People can choose how they want to live their lives.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting. With UBI, people don't have to take those bad jobs that pay almost nothing, so that could make wages go up and improve working conditions because employers would have to compete to get good workers.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If you don't need a job just to survive, you have more power to ask for more money or better benefits. But what about all those people who lose their jobs to AI? What happens to them in this new world?
That's where job training programs come in, the programs that help people learn the skills they need for the new jobs that are out there.
So it's not just about giving people money. It's about giving them the skills they need to succeed, even with AI changing everything.
Exactly. And UBI helps with that too. When people know they have money for their basic needs, they can take the time to go back to school or get training without worrying about how they'll pay their bills.
Okay, so in this best case scenario, UBI helps people learn new skills, do what they love, and be a part of society in a meaningful way. But are there any downsides to UBI, things that could go wrong?
Well, yeah, like any social program, there are challenges. One concern is that UBI could cause inflation, if prices go up because everyone has more money to spend. And another risk is that some people might just stop working altogether and rely only on their UBI payments.
So it's not a perfect solution. There's the potential for good and bad outcomes.
That's right. Whether UBI works or not would depend on a lot of things, like how much money people get, how the program is designed, and of course the overall economy. It's complicated.
It sounds like we're at the start of a really interesting journey, figuring out what an AI-driven future will look like and how to deal with it.
I agree, and it's a journey we need to take together. We need to be open-minded and willing to adapt.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to think about as they try to understand all these changes that are happening?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the future isn't set in stone. We create the future through the choices we make.
So we can choose the kind of world we want to live in. Even with all this crazy technology stuff happening, it's a big responsibility, but also a huge opportunity. So let's choose wisely.
Absolutely.
This has been the Deep Dive Podcast, brought to you by X9 Intelligence, LLC.
You can find us at x9intel.com.
Subscribe, read our blogs. We've got more deep dives coming your way. Thanks for listening.